I wanted to talk about John the Baptist, why it's so important for him to be included in the Gospels, why even tell his story. I mean, besides that it adds to the theatrics or whatever, makes a better story. You know that amongst those born of woman, there would be no greater than John. In other words, it doesn't matter um, if Jesus was like fully human or fully man, because I'm speaking from a universalist perspective here, because he didn't die for our sins. He died so that Yahweh could die with him, thus returning to the Father so that he could come back again in the outpouring of the Spirit at Pentecost, to be the influencer of the world that he couldn't be when that they had eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He left them. He was meant to be our good influencer, but he couldn't handle it when they did that. And he left them. And the best he could do was to relate to man through the law after that. That's the best he could do. But he needed to be able to do better. And so that's what the Noah story is actually about, by the way, is the Noah story and the releasing of the raven and the dove. The Noah story is meant to be about the confusion that existed after they had chosen to eat of the tree. Because of that confusion, it was as if it was flood. And the only refuge was the ark, which was Israel, which was, this thing that was engineered through all the Genesis and everything else. It was just a place for Yahweh to be, is what it's talking about, because he didn't have any place to be. If he didn't have like the temple, or, he dwelt on the ark. Yahweh needed a place to be. He needed Mount Sinai, for instance. And that was good. But he needed better, because he needed to also be writing history. Because Yahweh was getting to where eventually he could die, and that had to be with this man, Jesus. That to get to this man, it was going to take some doing on Yahweh's part. Who knows how much. But you see, he didn't have to be, some special kind of human being then, who was man and God at the same time, or whatever, and somehow all man, so that he could, die as a sacrifice. No, because he wasn't dying as a sacrifice. And that's how come he said John was actually, there would be none greater born among women, or of women, right? So he wasn't comparing John actually to Adam, because Adam technically was made of clay, but I don't think that was really what happened. I think Adam was taken from the earth, which is just a symbol for the peoples, you know. Just like in Revelation, when it talks about the dragon, when he comes down to earth, he spews forth this flood, and the earth opens up. So the people, they recognize, the woman is going to be persecuted, and so they they absorb it and deflect it away for her. So then we get back to John, because we know now what's going on. He's the greatest man according to the story. See, because Zechariah, John's father, was standing right there at the incense altar, which is, inside the triangle furniture, where if you've seen any of my experiments where I've done with my prospecting device and set up little scale models of the ark furniture that I painted with this gold colored paint, and then I can tune the frequency of the generator to the frequency that paint resonates at, and get the kind of effect that you would get if they were made out of solid gold. See, and then I discovered very interesting things about the ark and the patterns that it forms, and it's really important around where Zechariah was working, and that mentioned. And so you could see that Yahweh could have gone with Zechariah to somehow facilitate such that John would even be conceived, because Elizabeth was barren, right? Or maybe Zechariah didn't have any punch, but because that makes more sense, right? And that therefore Yahweh had to take over and be like a real part of John, from birth, which had never happened. People had always had the Spirit come on them or whatever, but they're not even. Adam, you could say, was born when the Spirit was breathed into him, because that's when he sort of became consciously aware the rest of the way that but he must have been chosen. If he was chosen from early man, he must have been chosen for some kind of thing that was going on in his consciousness that God was looking for, and yeah, and in a sense, the whole thing rested, all of this that was being made, that we could call creation, and that God would take Adam out of this because he wanted to work with him, especially that it was all coming along under the evolutionary paradigm, which God was using to make creation, which took billions of years. Because that's, sort of God's time scale, really. He doesn't care. He's eternal. It's like people say it takes, 100 million years to travel across this part of the universe. Well, guess what? If you're an eternal being, that's nothing. And you're like, okay, you don't necessarily sit down and play solitaire all day long either. Yeah, it's like that whole my thoughts are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are not my thoughts kind of thing. But you see, the deal is, that's at least what God must have been looking for, though, is something in Adam where Adam at least had the capability where his thoughts could be God's thoughts. So that to make him in his image was to, indwell him with his spirit, right? That was Yahweh. And Yahweh's job was to do that. Yahweh couldn't hack it, though, and Adam really needed it. Yeah, so he needed to go back. He needed to die in Jesus so that he could go back to the Father. And that's why John is included in every one of the Gospels. Because Yahweh had to get into the world somehow. And it's not Jesus' story that's actually being told, it's Yahweh's story. Yahweh comes into the world through John, and then at the baptism of Jesus, Yahweh also goes, because look at also what happened with the Holy Spirit at the outpouring. That Yahweh could go and be in multiple places at the same time, and that's what he could do. He could also be in Jesus. It's significant that John was dead, though, before Jesus died. So that was the only sort of, if you could use a programming term, yeah, what do they call that? Instance of Yahweh. Then that was going. If Yahweh was, I don't know how you program and say this is the presence of God. He's invisible, but he's certainly there in this weird way that it's being described. And the story is just one of his going through this. Like, he couldn't be born in Jesus because Jesus, he at least needed to live, to get to adulthood before Yahweh could go and be in him. So then he came into Jesus at the baptism, because Jesus never did any kind of miracles or anything like that before that. And then he says all these crazy things that if you care to interpret them correctly, they don't sound nearly so crazy anymore. It's just Yahweh speaking through the mouth of Jesus about himself. The weird stuff, the crazy stuff, things that people can hardly understand. Eat my body and drink my blood and all that stuff. That's very much about just, see, he needed to come back and be a part of them. The intimacy necessary when you have the Spirit to gain into this being like God existence and presence that you're looking for is it's pretty intimate. So you got to be vulnerable and everything. You got to listen to God. You got to have this this thing going on where He trusts you enough to speak to you in ways that maybe He doesn't speak to others, because maybe He does, but they just don't listen. And you can hear because you learn to listen. But learning to listen is hard. It's not easy. If listening was easy, anybody would do it. Yeah. The administration would be characterized by listening if it were easy. Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up about John, and a few thoughts about John and why the Gospels all include him and how important it is that his story's in there. Because, point of literary criticism and whatnot, you could say that the Gospels came about, and it's a very good theory, as elements of entertainment and entertaining literature. But I say they came about in response to the influence of the Pauline influence, because there wasn't just one Apostle Paul. There were a lot of counterfeit Apostle Pauls. There's a lot of different letters written, only so many by Paul, if there even was a Paul. But anyway, you had this near version of Christianity which God could accept, but which is so false that it's so obviously false. That Jesus died as a sacrifice, to fulfill the Jewish law. When the law was the only way that Yahweh could communicate with people, before he could go back to the Father and be changed and be made to where he could be more flexible, so that he could actually, because, he probably is a program like that, meaning that God only included so much of himself. I don't know how you imprint, the stuff that's going on in a conscious being and an unconscious being and the decision-making being and all that stuff. How do you print that into a human in John? How do you print it into a human in Jesus and have it stick like it's a personality? What is spirit? Because, are we just flesh and blood? Is it just our brains? Is there spirit too? I know this from the prospecting device I've got, that I've learned how to make the rods open and close if I wish it. Otherwise, I can just be completely neutral and non-involved, and they'll do whatever they're supposed to do just because of the thing. But I have learned that I can, because I can do it with the heart chakra. And I can open and close them, and like working out, I use it at the gym. It works really well for training and stuff like that, to make a person stronger, and yeah, worked pretty well up to the point last year when I was 60. I'm 61 right now. I could incline press 275 like 5 or 6 times. So yeah, I could leg press like 900 and something pounds, pretty darn close to 1,000. Yeah, for all kinds of reps. Yeah, so there's something to it. It's pretty amazing. There must be some kind of thing going on with spirit. What is it? And does it follow the same model as what goes on with the ark and the mathematics, and that, like, because there's so much there's infinity actually in zero, because 0 over 0 is not necessarily, is it 0? Is it 1? Is it undefined? you know and is it's classic 0, because the reason why 0 has to be undefined is because 0 doesn't always mean the same thing. It can mean different things in different equations, and in the same equation put through, you can have, if you mean 0 to be something different, it can have an influence, so that it's undefined. That's what I was told anyway. I read that somewhere, and I don't know where, some place, long time ago. Yeah. So the math of it is, what is 0? You can see the convergence at 0 of all the different things coming in there, and they tell you something about that 0 is infinite, and but it also is a passing through point into other things, and it's really a very interesting thing when you think about consciousness, because you can see that you can have interpretations coming to you, the way that light moves, but the opposite way, toward the middle, and to comply with whatever your form of 0 over 0, what it really means, they've got to become something, they change. It's interesting how that works. So yeah, I'm going to post this video, and there's another one I wanted to post, but I was interrupted because I've been putting some new solar panels up, and I had to put my panels together in a different way than I had it. I had them in parallel strings, and I needed to undo those and put some of the panels on one big string, and wait until I could get another charge controller and some more wire to work on the panels, the other set of panels, um, rather than try and put that string in parallel with the others, because it was cutting down what I could get too much anyway. And I'm getting much better with the one big string, which I bought more of the same panel at the store in Alamosa for a discount of they're about 50 a piece. So I now have 6 on the ground and 6 on the roof, making a 12 panel string, which is now producing enough that no matter what thing that I have that draws a lot of electricity, whether it's my cistern well pump or the air conditioner here in the trailer or the microwave, or like I've been testing the space heater, how's it going to work? Um, um, Different things. They all seem to be about 1,500 um, kilowatts, and now I have about 2,000 watts coming in on the panels. So it doesn't touch the batteries. In fact, if the batteries are even down a little, they'll be charging. Um, as long as I just have like one of those things on. It's not going to work with two. We'll see. Anyway,